They held a rich man's mouth open and poured liquid gold down his throat, not as torture by an enemy, as payment, because in life he had swallowed every bribe in the empire, and now, in the courts of the dead, the bill had finally come due. Hours before, this same man had been the most powerful person in China. And here's the strange part. None of it had truly happened yet. Let me tell you this story. It was the early Qing dynasty in the late 1600s. On a gray afternoon in the hills outside the capital, a young scholar named Zeng had just gotten the best news of his life. He had passed the imperial examination. Now, you have to understand what that meant. In old China, the examinations were the one door. A farmer's son, a nobody from a village you couldn't find on a map, could sit in a sealed room for days, write his essays on the ancient classics, and walk out, if he passed, onto the road that ran straight to the top of the empire. Magistrate, governor, minister, the whole country pinned its hopes and its sons on that one test. And Zeng had just walked through the door. So when a fortune teller in the market took his hand, studied his face, and said it flat out that Zeng had the bones of a man who would serve 20 years as prime minister, Zeng did not laugh. He believed it. You could watch it settle into him. The set of his shoulders, the way he started to talk. By the time he and a few friends climbed up to a little mountain temple to wait out the rain, he was already carving up the empire in his head. This friend, a governor. That one, a general. This office, for sale to whoever paid most. His friends laughed. He didn't. He meant every word. Inside the temple, an old monk had set a pot of millet to boil for their supper. Rain came down soft on the tiles. The room was warm, and Zeng, still talking about the power that was surely coming, leaned back against the wall. His eyes grew heavy and closed. And that's when the messenger arrived. An imperial summons, the emperor himself calling Zeng to court after he'd seen his exam results. He swept through gates he had only ever dreamed of, robed in silk worth more than his father earned in a lifetime, set down at the right hand of the throne, and the seal of the prime minister is pressed into his hands. He looks up, and every head in the great hall bows to him. 20 years, the fortune teller had said. It was the beginning. At first, Zeng told himself he would be a good minister. That lasted about as long as the first gift, because power has an appetite. The more you feed it, the hungrier it gets. The gifts came first, a jade cup, a chest of silk, then silver, then gold, carried in by cartloads and set down quiet at his back gate by men who wanted a son made magistrate, a rival made to vanish, a verdict turned the right way, and Zeng found that he could give them all of it for a price. He sold offices the way a merchant sells fish. He took a stretch of good farmland from a family who had worked it for 9 generations because he wanted it. And who was going to stop him? He saw another man's daughter, a girl famous 3 counties over for her beauty, and he took her too. He lived like a second emperor, and every morning he woke a little richer and a little less like the boy who had once sat in a sealed room and dreamed of doing good. Now, not everyone bowed. There was an honest official named Bao, the kind of man every rotten court has one of, and usually only one. Bao watched what Zeng was doing, and he did the most dangerous thing a man can do anywhere near power. He wrote it down, a letter to the emperor, every bribe, every theft, every name. He laid the whole rotten house out on the throne room floor. And the emperor, this is the part that should frighten you, the emperor read it and gave Zeng the benefit of the doubt, which left Zeng free to answer. He didn't argue. He didn't deny a thing. He simply reached out with everything he now was and broke the man who had told the truth. Bao was stripped of his post, driven from the capital in disgrace. The honest man ruined, the liar still holding his seal. A message rang through every office in the empire. Say out loud what Zeng is, and this is what happens to you. After that, nobody wrote any more letters. So Zheng stood at the very top of the world. Wealth no one could count. A court that flinched when he frowned. The ear of the emperor himself. He had reached the one place every ambitious man secretly dreams of. The place where there is no one left in all the world who can tell you no. Now, he thought that meant he had won. He had no idea he was already falling. Because thrones are wheels, they turn. The old emperor's favor cooled, the way warmth always does, and the officials who had bowed the lowest were the first to smell blood. The letters started again, only this time the emperor read them differently. And in a single stroke, it all came undone. His titles gone, his fortune seized, down to the last coin, his household scattered to the wind. And Zheng himself, the prime minister of all of China, was sentenced to exile, marched south toward the wild edge of the empire like a common criminal. And out on that lonely road, the people he had ruined were waiting for him. The family whose land he had stolen, the kin of the men he had killed, they came out of the trees with knives, they dragged him down off his cart, and they did not listen to a single word he said. The most powerful man in China 1 breath ago, and now his head rolled in the dust of a road whose name he never even learned. From the right hand of the emperor to a body in a ditch, that fast. If that just got you and you're still not somehow subscribed, what are we even doing here? Stay with me, because death is not where this story ends. It's where it gets worse, because Zheng opened his eyes in the courts of the dead. He was dragged before the king of the underworld, and there was a ledger, a long, patient ledger, and written in it was every coin he had ever taken and every life he had broken. No fortune teller here, no silk, no seal, only accounting. In life, he had swallowed it. Bribe after bribe, gift after gift, a fortune poured down his throat. So in death, they gave it all back to him. They held his mouth open, and then they poured it in, molten, glowing. Every coin he had ever taken, paid back in full, in fire. You'd think that would be the end of the sentence. It wasn't, because the dead had decided that Zheng had never once known what it felt like to stand on the other side of his own power. So they sent him back into the world, not as a lord, not even as a man, as a girl, born into a beggar family, into hunger, into a life with no doors in it at all. She was sold. She was beaten by the wife of the house that bought her. And when a murder happened under that roof, a murder she had nothing to do with, it was the powerless girl they pinned it on. They sentenced her to die by the slow blade. And on the execution ground, as the first cut came, she opened her mouth and screamed. And Zheng sat up, in a temple, in the hills, rain on the tiles, his friends still talking, an old monk leaning over a pot. The yellow millet wasn't even cooked yet. He had lived an entire life, risen, ruled, fallen, died, and been judged in less time than it takes to boil a pot of rice. The monk looked at him. There was no cruelty in it, just a small, knowing smile. And he asked one question. Was being the prime minister, he said, everything you'd hoped? Zheng couldn't answer. He got to his feet, and he bowed to the old man, low, all the way to the ground. Then he walked out of that temple and up into the mountains to learn how to live a life that no one would ever have to pour back down his throat. He was never seen again in court. Behind him, the rice was still cooking. Now, the author, Pu Songling, gave this one a title with a wink in it. He called it a sequel to the Yellow Millet Dream, a nod to an even older story about a man who learned this exact lesson while an innkeeper boiled a pot of millet. 350 years before anybody wrote, "It was all a dream," China was already telling it. The funny thing about that lesson is, it never seems to go out of date. We like to think power reveals who a man really is. Maybe it just takes away every reason he ever had to pretend. The frightening part of this story isn't the gold or the blade or the courts of the dead. It's how little time it took, and how easily it could have been any of us in that chair. If you know someone who's climbing toward the top of something, share this video with them. They will love this story. The story on your screen right now is one of my favorites. A dying man hands a stranger his last piece of silver in trust. The stranger builds an entire fortune on it, and years later, the debt comes to collect in a way nobody saw coming. Click it right now, and I'll see you in the next story.